So, welcome, Mike Blocker, to the Co-Creative Sex Dialogues. We're live on Facebook. I have got the great honor of having our best life and dating coach, Mike Blocker, here to tell us all about the real stuff because he's about the real conversations. So, I'm really excited that I can just ask you things and you're ready to talk to us about it.
I'm
Um,
ready.
tell us a little bit how it's going out in Atlanta just before we jump in.
Well, I recently transitioned back to Atlanta from Los Angeles to kind of ride out the pandemic because Atlanta is open. So, for example, the gym is open here, and I miss going to the gym, and it's closed. So things are different. It's not as warm and sunny as California and LA. It's a little rainy and wet, but Atlanta's my home, you would say. So it's good to be back around loved ones and family and around green. So, me, I make the best of any situation. So it's great. It's
So
going
I
good.
decided to put on our tagline, our title, a pretty juicy topic,
Hmm.
around having a sex addiction and what does that look like and how do you work through it. But maybe before we jump into the core of this conversation, let's warm up a little bit.
Okay.
Um, so tell me, what actually got you to want to be a relationship and a best life coach? Like, what was that journey, and why did you discover that that was actually an important contribution to society to do that?
Wow. Good question. First of all, let me say thank you for having me and for, doing this interview and having me on your program. So thank you. So, a lot of times it's the traumatic things, the bad experiences we go through that alter the trajectory of our lives, sometimes for the better and sometimes not. So, what really got me on this path was I had a girlfriend, uh, the one that I say developed what I call my sex addiction. That same girl um, cheated with my two best friends.
Mm.
So I felt like Julius Caesar. I felt like A2 Brutus, like, oh, like I just got stabbed in the back. Like I got betrayed by the three closest people in my life. And I was mad and upset over this for a long time. But the good thing is I needed questions. I needed answers. So I started reading every relationship book I could get, anything to try to understand what had happened, where I had went wrong. And so that was the beginning of me building this knowledge base of relationships and love and in that context. And then I started doing a lot of personal development work, and I got me a coach when I started doing work, and I loved the difference that it made for me. So the combination of those two things kind of came together, and that is why I chose that as a career. And I love relationships, and everything is a relationship. You have a relationship with yourself, relationship with your parents, your siblings, your job. It's all relationships anyway. So I figured I better get really good at relationships if I want to have an amazing experience here in life. So
Mhm.
that kind of
Yeah.
sums it up.
Well, I was just curious, why do you think that happened to you? That sort of betrayal of the three most closest people in your life. Like, what were the signs that this was unfolding, and how did it sort of, why do you think it occurred in your life?
Well, if I take responsibility for it, um, what I would say is that none of us were, I was young at this time, it's like 20, 21.
Okay.
And I don't think any of us had the tools or the level of communication that was needed to express how we really were feeling, what we really were thinking. And we were young, and one was my roommate. One of my friends was my roommate. And I knew, that we all were like, you know, wild and crazy and party and sexual people. And so I kind of probably should have saw that it was a possibility. But at that time, young, partying, having fun. And I don't know, I guess I would say we just didn't have the tools to really communicate, that. And to be honest, I never found out the full details of everything. Nobody told me, but I just know that it happened. So I would say that it was, we were young, we wanted to have sex and do stuff and just, but we wasn't talking. Nobody was communicating. No,
Mm,
there was no communication around it. So
mhm,
I would think that would be the biggest thing. And then just um, there's a lot of shame and guilt associated with sex that
mhm,
comes up for people. So I would say that it was in that world. Yeah.
mhm. Wow, yeah. Well, it's interesting. I wasn't actually expecting this conversation with you, but last week we had a whole session around whole podcast on, dealing with someone having an affair or cheating. And I asked this question to Julia last week, and I want to ask it to you too. When you first found out, what was the physical impact on your body? Like, what was the feeling in your body?
Um, there was a chemical that was released in my brain. It's that I don't know which one, the dopamine, serotonin. I don't know which chemical it was, but it was the chemical that makes you feel like you're going to faint. You know that, and takes
Oh,
your breath away. It was like a shock, to my system. Like,
wow.
oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And and then immediately following that was anger. Like there was this rage that came up in me that that I had to just stop, take a few seconds to catch my breath.
Mm,
So it wasn't a good feeling at all.
mm.
Uh,
Yeah, like that
Scary.
feeling of betrayal. Did you feel even at your communication, something stopped at your communication, like almost, this kind of
Well,
feeling
I couldn't even
of
confront anyone in that moment. Like it took me a few minutes to just be with it, just to accept the information. Like, you ever have a moment in your life when you see something and you just can't believe it's real? Like your brain can't process it as the truth in that moment. You're like, what? Hold on. Like it was that kind of thing. It was like, I- no, that can't be right. So it was like I was in shock, you know, and I wanted it to not be true.
Mm,
So in the very beginning, I didn't even accept it. Like for a minute, I was in denial around it. Like I couldn't even be with it.
yeah.
So
Wow.
it was
Very-
traumatic.
Yeah, that's a very powerful moment.
So
So,
I would
yeah.
like to share one thing to the just because I think this might make a difference for people. So I was mad at this woman, particularly for 22 years. That's how long it was before I found her years later on Facebook. And I wanted to meet up with her to give her a piece of my mind and let her know, how she hurt me and the impact she, had on my life. And so she agreed. We met on Facebook for the she agreed to meet me and we go out to have lunch one day. I met her like on her lunch break at work. And she says, I don't remember any of that. And I'm like, what? She goes, I don't remember any, I have no recollection of that experience. And I'm shocked again, a second time by her. Like, this was the most traumatic thing I had ever experienced. And you don't remember it? She like, I don't remember. She actually said, I thought we had a great relationship. I had been thinking about you and I'm sitting there like, whoa. How? So here's my point by sharing that. I gave a massive amount of significance from this experience and like it altered my life in the way I behave in relationships. It was one of the main reasons why I started to not believe in monogamy, like as a result of this. And for her, it never even happened, you know? So I walked away from that encounter with her knowing that we can choose how we experience something and how long we hold on to it and how long we, the significance, it's our choice because she totally let it go. Like totally was like, never happened.
Well, do you think she was in denial?
I don't know. But either way, it brought that up for me as why was I still holding on to it 22 years later?
Yeah.
Why hadn't I let it go?
Yeah.
Like, why was it important that I had to let her know? Like, why was that necessary?
Mm.
Like,
What did it go hurt? Like, why was it such a deep hurt?
For me,
Yeah, what did you discover about that?
um, well, really what I made it mean is that they didn't love me. That's what I made it mean. Because if she and my best friends loved me, they wouldn't have done that.
Hmm.
So it just reinforced the already present um, belief that I had that I was not worthy of love. And
Yeah,
that's what I made it mean.
right.
Yeah. And that was
So what?
confirmation.
So what was the impact then on your life? Like you said, it was a very significant impact.
Well, from that moment on, one thing was that I decided, I don't believe in monogamy anymore. Like I don't, because up until that point, I believed if you found this special girl, that special connection, you wouldn't want anybody else. They wouldn't want. Like I was kind of had believed that in this relationship. I thought, we had something special, and I'm like, well, that got shattered. That belief got shattered, and I didn't have trust. I didn't trust people after that, and
Mm.
so I decided that non-monogamous relationships would work better. And I believe that at some point I kind of closed a little bit of my heart off and and put more emphasis on maybe say the physical, the sexual part of relationships and less on emotional and intimacy because, you know, the I felt like that's where the hurt was.
Yeah,
So it definitely it impacted me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how did the whole sort of root of non-monogamy work out for you?
The root, what do you mean by the root?
Because you're like in that moment you decided, hey, like I'm gonna give up on monogamy. I'm gonna go for polyamory because this seems to be much less dangerous.
I think now at that time, it was because I felt like, well, nobody else is practicing it, so why should I be trying to practice it? But now I look back and see that it was a way to avoid having deeper connections with someone, making a commitment, which was underneath that was the fear of that commitment that I'm going to get hurt again if I do this again. So I tried it, monogamy a time or two since then, but it did diminish my belief in it and my willingness to participate in it. And I
Mm,
was like, it's not true. Because I had believed that women were the ones who wanted it and requested it the most. And for a woman to not fulfill on that request, I'm like, wow, I thought this is what you wanted, you know? so, so yeah, it just, I didn't believe in it as much after that. Didn't desire it.
so some form of illusion fell for you. And is it still in that
Yes.
state now? Like, do you still feel that? What's your relationship with these different concepts?
Well, now I still don't believe monogamy is natural way of being for humans. I believe it's one of the options we have. It's a choice we can make, and I believe it is very difficult in today's times for men and women. But there are people who are good and successful at it. But it's not my first choice. I would rather have more open or polyamorous or and let me make this clear for those listening. My my beliefs around monogamy are more aligned with freedom. In relationships, there's always a balance of freedom versus security.
Mhm.
Some people prefer more security. I prefer more freedom.
Mm,
So the main reason why I want non-monogamy is because I just want more freedom. And it isn't necessarily that freedom means I have to, be promiscuous. It's just to not feel like I'm obligated, that I have to be with this person because of a piece of paper at the courthouse or some other reason. I want to be in a relationship where we choose each other daily. I choose you because I choose you. Not,
mhm.
well, I made this agreement, so,
Right.
it's
So you
different
want
stuff.
something conscious and sort of like embodied and mindful rather than just getting a default mode and playing out a script.
Right. So in an open relationship, I've been in open and I've been in monogamous. When you're in an open relationship and you know that the woman you're dating, she's attractive, men are attracted to her, she can go out at any time and be with another guy if she chooses. But every day she chooses to be with you, she's there because she wants to be there. versus if it's, monogamous, it's like, okay, we made a commitment or a promise to give up other people. So I'm doing this not because I really want to, because I made the promise.
Mm,
It's, to me, it's a different energy, different context.
mm.
So
And
I,
for
I
you, and for you, since like that first moment was kind of the trust was broken, having someone give you your trust or you give your trust doesn't have as much weight anymore.
you mean from when it was trust was broken?
Well, from that initial 20-year-old experience,
Yes. Yes.
trust is has brought a lot of hurt to you.
Yes.
So for you, there's a big edge there of like trusting, and so it that piece of trust around giving someone your trust is a scary thing. It's not necessarily sure. It's like, well, I'm not sure if this is really what you mean.
Well, you know how they say expectations lead to disappointment, like upset if you have expectations. So in a monogamous relationship, there's the expectation that your significant other will be with no one but you, right? And then anytime that expectation is not met, infidelity happens, there's a massive upset, marriages end, families get, So flip it, in an open relationship, the expectation isn't there.
Mhm,
Okay. So if you're not expecting this person to only be with you, if they're with someone else, you're not upset
mhm,
because I didn't expect you to not do that.
mhm,
So then if they are just with you, you're like, hey, that's a bonus.
mhm,
So another way for me to avoid the expectation,
mhm.
a little
And
shortcut
the disappointment.
of the expectation not being met.
Now, some people like they sort of are monogamous, but like in a sort of sequential way, they'll have many different partners over time.
Right.
And then there's
Serial monogamy.
yeah, and then there's some people that will have multiple lovers at the same time. Um, and so there's different qualities of different things. There's when you have a multiple at the same time, there's also a lot of attention and care that you have to give to all of them, right? And sort of
Right.
it takes a lot of presence to be able to show up in that intimate way that we're talking about, that's possible in relationships, right?
Right. And
how,
for the
how do you feel
record,
about that? How do you feel about that level of intimacy that you can achieve
okay, so let
in
me just
relationships?
say this. For the record, monogamy means like literally you mate with one person, for life. That's monogamy. What we practice is serial monogamy. I just want to make that clear. We're monogamous during that relationship, and then we're monogamous. That's serial monogamy. Now, so your question was, is the level of intimacy impacted by?
It depends. Like it depends if you're like I feel like serial monogamy, you're it's easier to give your full attention to that person because you're with one person. But when you're actually practicing polyamory with a few people at the same time, it takes a lot of attention and presence as well and time to make sure that you're present in that intimate way with each one of them, right?
That is true. So there's a couple ways that I look at this. One is, let's just say if you have 100% of your time or 100% of your intimacy, bucket, and you decided to do it with three women. One woman gets 30%, another one gets 30, and one gets 40. You're still getting your 100%. You just kind of split it up. Or you could be, well, I'm going to give this one woman 100%. Like it's up to you. And
Hmm.
for me, the level of intimacy isn't diminished necessarily the total amount based upon because I'm seeing more than one person, because I've been in monogamous relationships where we had little to no intimacy,
Hmm.
you know? So I think the level of intimacy isn't a matter of how many people you're seeing. It's about how much intimacy you're going to bring to the relationship.
Hmm. Like
Because
in
I could,
15 minutes, there can be a lot of intimacy.
it can. And, if you think about monogamous, there are some people who are in monogamous relationships that don't spend a lot of time with their significant other because of work or long distance, and they might not have a lot of intimacy, and it's a monogamous relationship.
Hmm.
So that's not a
The intimacy in the intimacy journey is a specific journey that requires a lot of opening up and being
Yes.
seen,
Yes.
and
And
yeah.
in a open or polyamorous relationship, it requires, versus a monogamous relationship, it requires a greater level of communication, a greater level of trust, honesty, openness. Like, it's required. So, in my opinion, people who practice non-monogamy actually have to have a stronger foundation, stronger connections, stronger intimacy to make that work.
Mm,
Because in a monogamous relationship, a lot of things get taken for granted,
mm,
you
mhm,
know?
mhm.
So in my opinion, having done both, I think the level of connection is greater in an open relationship. Remember, in your co-creative, in your book, you talk about the different connections. The more connections you have, the better the sex. Well, an open relationship or polyamory requires more connections.
Mm.
So it's having done both, I'm always gonna, choose that first if it's
So
an option.
yeah, so like let's say, that whole concept of like, when you have one foot in and one foot out, you know,
Yeah, I've done that
that
a lot.
that can also be a dynamic that one sees when it's like there is something that comes with putting your 2 feet in, committing, even if you're in a polyamorous relationship, right? So what does it look like to be committed in a polyamorous relationship?
Well, to be committed in a polyamorous relationship requires, as you said, to be all in, to be fully in, is to be responsible and have the integrity needed to actually do it the way it's designed to be done. And that's not easy because it's a lot of tough conversations that you have to deliver and some challenging conversations that you have to hear, you know?
So just
And
give me a little bit of an example of what those conversations could look like.
well, to hear your girlfriend, tell you that she likes something that you can't deliver, you know? Like, just to say I dated a one woman and she liked women, for example. And her request was, hey, she literally said, I'm not gonna, date you unless you're okay with me seeing women. And at first I was like, whoa, because, you know, I had it that I can't give you what another woman can give you because, so, my ego was a little bit, took a
Mhm.
took a hit to think, man, like, wow, like, I'm not enough. You have to have this girl to keep you satisfied. So that's a tough conversation to be with as a man. That took something,
Mm,
and to know that that was something that she desired. She desired something beyond what I offered her.
mm.
And so it took some time to get over that.
Like not feel like you have to be the all end all everything. And to
Yes, and to not be jealous over that. To actually get to the point where that now, the opposite of the word jealousy is compersion. And it means, instead of experience, jealousy or fear or anger when you see your mate with someone else, you actually could, like, be happy for them or get some pleasure or some arousal around it. I mean, think about how people who watch porn, you watch porn and you see that's not you and that's another couple, and you can get some, well, you can have that experience with your significant other too. That's a possibility.
Mhm.
So I'm more on that end of the spectrum now.
So tell me, like, what has been your most intimate relationship? What did it look like and what did it feel like? And what parts of yourself were you opening up and letting in on?
That's a good question. Wow. So I will say this. I have recently discovered that my level of participation or the amount of intimacy that I was bringing to relationships was probably like that much. But I thought it was like this, you know what I mean? and, then, and then when I realized, because sex is not necessarily intimacy, you know? And so to be honest and answer that question, until recently, I hadn't even been really, really practicing being intimate. So intimacy a new thing for me. So I would say the most intimate relationships I've had would be probably in the past couple years. Like until then, I don't think I really had the level of intimacy where I was really concerned with my partner and how they were feeling and what. So maybe the last relationship, and now I'm practicing more intimacy. It's actually something that I'm working on creating. Like I'm putting effort, and I have expressed to the women that I date to hold me accountable to that, to make sure that I practice intimacy. So,
What would intimacy look like to you?
well, for me, it would mean to be two things. One, intimacy is vulnerability. That I kind of did practice that, being just vulnerable, being open. And then the other part is to be, um, I'm trying to think of the word, to be in a physical, touching, kissing, holding, or something like that, and to not have sex as the goal.
Mm.
Because for me, so many times it was the minute we start touching and kissing, I'm already like planning out sex routine. And so to me, that wasn't intimacy because I was, it was in order to get somewhere. It wasn't just, hey, I just want to be with you and touch you and hold you and not think about that. So intimacy would be all the physical, touching, kissing, cuddling, snuggie, any of that, and then intimate conversations without, you know, sex in the background. That
Mm.
makes sense?
Yeah. So do you feel like having intimate conversations with women is easy or difficult for you?
Actually, the conversation part has never really been that hard.
You seem like a really good
Yeah, I had that part.
conversations and
It's only a challenge when I'm worried about their feelings. If I'm not worried about their feelings, then it just kind of
what
pours
do you
out.
mean? What do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean by worried about their feelings?
When you believe the conversation is going to hurt a woman's feelings, then I'm in my head going, how do I say this that she's not going to be hurt? And so in those moments,
Example of something that would hurt a woman.
say that again.
Give me an example of something that would hurt a woman that you would
Um,
have to deliver on, that you'd have to speak.
well, anytime you tell a woman, you criticize or make comments about her sexual performance, that never really goes over well. You know what I mean? So
I guess it doesn't go well for anyone.
no, but you know what? This is what I said about that intimacy, that honest conversations, because I feel people kind of almost force you like to like tell you that the sex is good with them. Even if it's not good, you just be like, oh man, it's the best. It's awesome, right? Because the minute you tell somebody their sex is bad, they're probably not going to give you any more. You know what I mean? So you have to say, oh, girl, you know. So that's a tough conversation. Let's say
Yeah.
if you like somebody, but the sex is but you like them.
Hmm.
You
Or
know,
like, how do you work on it to improve it or to improve the
right,
connection or
right,
figure out what's in the way or
right. But that
it
first
sounds like a very
conversation,
it does sound like a very judgmental thing to be like, hey, the sex is bad with you.
I
Don't
mean,
you want I don't know what we're gonna do. We like each other, but the sex is really bad.
what was that you were doing in there? What was that? Your
And
rhythm was all off.
it doesn't seem really conducive to like building something, put it that way.
No, I mean, but what do you do? What if you really do like someone and you wanna work on that? You have to have that conversation,
Yeah.
and that's a tough conversation to have.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah, really exploring what both people like and don't like, and like get it out of like a kind of more unconscious routine, as you say. You're like, I get into it. I'm like, I'm gone to the to the
yeah,
games.
yeah. So that's a tough one. Or if you want to address something about their hygiene,
Right.
that's a tough one. You're like, hey girl, kind of, kind of maybe not too fresh there. That's how do you say that, But yeah, those are tough conversations sometimes, but
True.
sometimes you
True.
have to have them.
Yeah. So yeah, so we kind of were talking about, the index of like, okay, there's the physical pleasure and beauty and connection with someone of sex, but then there's this intimacy factor, and it's like, how do you bring it in? How does it increase? And how do you play with the two things? Um, and you shared with me that you were struggling with that in terms of, like, you called it, that you had a sex addiction. And I was just curious, and that you were struggling with bringing in more intimacy. So I was just curious
Yes.
for you, like, what does sex addiction mean for you, anyways?
So good question again, and I wanna maybe expand on that definition for some people.
Yeah.
So to me, my definition of an addiction is anything that you feel like you cannot live without, right? Like I have to have this, and then you have to have it a certain way, and you want it to be it. Addiction doesn't necessarily mean like you missing work or you're going out committing nefarious acts to get this. It doesn't have to be that. It can be like a functional something you do every day, but you just have to do it. And I wouldn't even say it rules your life, but it's something that you don't want to give up. And you put structures and things in place to make sure you have this thing, whatever it is. It could be if you like to take a hot bath every night. And if you don't take a hot bath one night, you're off. You're having anxiety. You're addicted to hot baths. So what happened for me was,
Can I just add one thing to that definition? Like, I'm curious if it's also like there's something you have to have, but you start doing things kind of mischievously to get it. Would that also
well,
be part of it? Or
you could add that to the definition, but I'm saying some addictions don't go that far, but because you don't have to do anything nefarious to take a hot bath every night. But if you're experiencing some anxiety, if you have a feeling of loss or something's missing because you missed that thing for one day, then technically you're addicted to that.
Hmm.
Okay. So
Or
now,
dependent on it in some way.
right, you're like
Dependent.
I have to have it. I have to have it. So for me, how that showed up in sex, and this ties into the intimacy thing. Um, well, first of all, let me add this. No one ever taught me what sex was or how to have sex or what intimacy was. I learned from porn. That was my teacher of, porn videos and magazines. That was so I kind of came out thinking that stuff that I saw in porn was normal. So that was number one. And there's not a lot of intimacy in porn. It's like, hey babe, how you doing? Working out? And it's like they get right to it. So that was kind of like that guy. Let's just get right to it. So what happened was I got to a point where I had to know that I was going to get the sex that I wanted from a woman, or I wouldn't proceed any further into a relationship with her. So I say an addiction because it was that important to me. Like I had to know, hey, are you going to have sex as much as I want and the way I want? Because if not, then we can stop this right here. Like I'll give you a nice comfortable seat in the friend zone, and you could just observe me from there, you know? And so what that caused was it narrowed the window of women that were available to me because one, if she didn't, and it also had me believe that there was only a certain type of woman that could fulfill my sexual appetite. So I kind of, looked for, more loose women, shall we say, easy girls, the girls that didn't make you work hard for it. I'm like, okay, that's the one I want. She's a, she'll go home with you on a first date. That's my girl, right? So I did what I call a copy paste thing. I kept picking the same girl over and over because I was trying to copy paste this amazing sex that I had when I was 20, 21. I'm like, oh my God, that was so great. I want to do that again. Even though I got my heart broke, I still was trying to copy paste that relationship. So what I noticed over now that I'm 50 and I noticed over the past 20, something years is that I kind of dated the same girl over and over and over again. Different variations, 2.0, 3.0, 4, but pretty much the same girl. And until recently, that hadn't changed. So that was the addiction. I was addicted to having it look a certain way and be a certain way. And I didn't want it if it couldn't be the way that I wanted, you know? And again, you could have that for a Starbucks coffee. I have to have my latte at 102 degrees with 2 scoops. Like, and I don't want it if it's not,
Mhm.
but I had that around sex.
Mhm.
And I put a lot of emphasis on it and a lot of pressure on women to have sex and to perform. And over time, in the beginning, when we're in the honeymoon, it was great. But then over time, what kept happening is the women that I was dating, they told me, "Hey, I feel like we're having a lot of sex, but there's no intimacy. There's no, they would say that, like the whole hand holding and the kissing, and like enough of that wasn't present for them, and that it occurred to them as
Like
if
the sort of more romantic side, like the more
right out
sexy
there, like I
side.
wasn't I wasn't doing that. I was like, again, they wanted romantic comedy and I wanted porn.
Mhm.
So,
Like, would it be like you have sex and then they're hoping to go for a walk with you, but then you're like, I'm off to do something else. I'm going to the gym.
that or I'm doing something else and I just say, "Hey, you want to have sex?" Like I'm just let's get to it. Like I'm not, holding her hand and oh baby, you're so pretty. Let's sit on the couch, let's talk. Like there, I wasn't good at doing the build up. I just would, kind of want to, get right to it. And on over time for a woman, that doesn't.
Okay, yeah, finish that, and I have another question.
No, go ahead. So
I just
so
want to
that's
add. I just want to add, like, so when you have that sex moment, that you're like, hey, I just want this, and then I can leave. Like, what does it do to you? Like, what was it that was like? What were you getting in that moment for you?
um so and now I have distinguished this because I believed again no one had set me down and had a conversation of what love is versus what sex is. So I actually believed that sex was love.
Mm,
So for a long time in that moment, I believed that if we had some good sex, we had a love connection. Like I believed that was intimacy. So for me, I was experiencing love. I would have great sex and I would go, girl, I love you. I'm so in love with you, and for me that was real. But the woman was like, I'm not experiencing that love. We just had some sex. And so it actually was love on top of the
was it this
releasing
kind of
of.
hormonal feeling of love? Like, oh my God, that was so, it made you feel so good that you're like, thank you for giving me that, like, feeling in my body kind of thing?
I mean, it was a little of that, but of course, it was the serotonin, dopamine, the chemical that was released. I felt that, but because I didn't know any difference,
Mm.
to me, I was calling it love because I thought that it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Yeah,
for
yeah.
me, it was, even though it was probably at the level here of what's possible, something like that. Because I had never had anything else, I thought that was great.
Mm.
And I didn't even desire anything else because
Mm.
I thought, man, this is as good as it's going to get right here. And it
Mhm.
took years of working on me to realize that there's a whole nother world of intimacy out there. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been missing this all this time.
Yeah. Like,
you know?
why did you start doing personal development? Like, why did you know that you had to do something, work on yourself?
Because my wife, who also was another sexual based relationship that I got into, um, left me. She told me one day she wanted a divorce, and because I didn't make her feel loved, was her reason. She goes, "I don't feel like you love me. I feel like you just want to have sex with me." And I'm like, "What?" And so that was like a train that just hit me out of nowhere. I didn't see that coming, and that made me say, "Okay, I'm missing something here."
Mm.
Because I didn't even know she was that unhappy.
Mm.
Didn't even know. And so I was like, wow, how did I miss that? And that started me on the path of personal development because I knew I was doing something wrong and I wasn't paying attention.
And what did you discover in that journey? Like, what did you discover that you weren't, why weren't you able to give love, like in the way that she wanted to be loved? What did you discover? Is it all linked back to that first experience of in your 20s, or is it prior to that with your family dynamics?
So
Or
what I have now distinguished is that it all went back to my childhood and my relationship with my mother and the women who raised me, right?
Mm,
Because these were my first models of how to be in a relationship with women. And in those relationships, in my culture, it was a matriarchy, and the women were the last word and dominant, and what the woman said or went. And I said this today to one of my friends. I've never had an argument with my mom, never, ever, not once, because I couldn't argue with her. Arguing with her would mean I got popped in the mouth, or so there was never, whatever she said went, and I just had to. So I had issues with my mother that were incomplete. And so that was showing up in my relationships with women.
how
And
was it showing up?
how was it showing up?
Like, what were you, what link do you make?
Well, I felt constantly emasculated by women.
Hmm.
I felt unworthy,
Mm.
not loved, because I had that experience with my mom, that I wasn't loved a lot. And I mean, I now know it wasn't true, but as a kid, that's what I made up. That's the story that I made up, and I
Mhm.
took that into my adult life. And
Mhm.
and so I felt like, man, these women don't really love me. They don't want me. They just want what they want from me. And so I wasn't intimate. I wasn't very
What do they want from you?
just whatever they wanted, whatever their agenda was, whether it was their romantic comedy life. They wanted. I felt quite often as if um, either two things. I felt a lot in women. I felt like I was an accessory to their life, like they had a checklist: good job, career, boyfriend, check, and I was like on the checklist. Or I felt like they had some fairy tale dream of what, whether it was the Cinderella story, or, some version of happily ever after. Like they had a script, some kind of romantic comedy script, and they were looking for me to fill in that blank.
Mhm.
That was my experience a lot of times. Like we weren't creating something together. It was like my agenda versus their agenda. You know
Right.
what I mean? And that's kind of what my experience was so often in relationships.
That's a
But
really good way of putting it.
that's how it felt. And so, but it did go back to, I discovered that it was all the way back to my childhood. And basically, to be honest, I just didn't know. I just honestly was ignorant to so many things. And I had never
Well,
taken the time to learn.
if you just explain, like, your relationship with your mother, it was pretty harsh, or very, very disciplinary.
Mhm.
There wasn't a lot of affection there, it sounds as though. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, in times when it was, the space for it, it was there. But my mom was just very firm, you know what I mean? And when she said something, it was like there was no question, and it wasn't. And, as a kid, I was scared of my mom. I had one of those moms, she could just give you a look and you just, you know. And so I could have made her out to be even more scary than she was, just because, that was the story I made up about my mom. We all make up stories about our parents and people,
Absolutely.
and then we live into it. And then you realize, man, that wasn't really how it was. That's how I saw it. That was my interpretation. And like I said, I just carried that with me. I never even questioned it. It literally became part of who I was. And it was the filter of which I viewed the world. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
So,
And
but did you feel like there that you didn't have that experience of what intimacy was with your mom, so it's like you just didn't have it as an experience. You didn't know what it looked like or what it tastes like.
right, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't like hugs every day, I love
Yeah.
you, kissy. It just wasn't that. And so when I would date a woman and they wanted to like hug me and kiss me all the time, I'm like, what's all this hugging stuff? Why
I
are we doing all this
uncomfortable almost.
kissing? They didn't do that in the porno movie that I watched. That's what are you doing?
Yeah.
No,
And what was your father like? Was he present?
no, my father was not very present. He was kind of in and out. And some would say he was a Rolling Stone player type. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Well dressed, gift of gab, kind of just, you know, moving around, jumping around, kind of man. So no, I didn't get any influence from him or my
Or
stepdad.
presence or intimacy with him,
No,
even?
no one ever took the time to sit me down and say, hey, son, this is how you should treat a woman, and this is how you like. I never got those type of lessons. So,
But the interesting thing is, I think, even beyond conversations like that, it actually, it's even if there's words that are given to children and the actions aren't there, usually kids will say, "This is what I was told, but I saw this happen." So it really is actually the most powerful a way of educating is actually by modeling or by the real authenticity of whatever's being experienced, right? So any kid sniffs out inauthenticity, they're gonna smell it, right?
never thought about that. But if they are aware enough to distinguish it, a
Well,
lot
they
of
might
times
not distinguish it, but they'll just feel something's off, or they won't believe in something, or they'll be
at a
critical.
certain age, when they get above 8 or 9, maybe, but when they're below that, they almost believe everything's real. It's true when they're young. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but you
I would
usually
agree.
feel a disconnect if something's being told something, and then you discover underneath there's other things going on. There's a bit of a
Yes,
disconnect, right?
yes,
Yeah,
cognitive dissonance.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, it's beautiful. No, thank you. You really create the link between, why in relationships this whole factor of intimacy just didn't seem to exist, because when you go back to your childhood, you realize it wasn't really present for you. And
no.
so when you were, having these relationship, failures or difficulties or whatever you want to call it, you're sort of like surprised, like, why didn't this work? Like, I was happy.
Right.
And then you had to sort of do a bit of soul searching and discover. So when you've discovered more of this other realm, has it been fulfilling? Has it been actually a beautiful experience to discover these things?
So that's why I was also saying I felt like that there was an addiction to the sex part, because even when I discovered there's this world of intimacy, I'm like, well, how can I do that? But I don't want to give up. I still want to keep the sex because I'm so accustomed to that. And so that has been a challenge for me. I mean, I finally had some breakthroughs around it in the past year, but even once I first discovered intimacy, practicing it and being in it and not have the sex on the brain, that was a challenge, because it was almost like my brain was just wired to go, okay, how can we get sex out of this? Oh, we're kissing. Okay, how can we get sex out of this? We're kissing, you know. Okay, we're holding hands. Okay, what's next? We're gonna kiss. Then we're gonna like it was like this thought process started to just to go in that direction. So now though, I've now realized that I don't have to. I don't have to now. Now it isn't a I have to have the sex. I've transformed that for myself, where it's like, you know what? I don't get it. It's okay. It's fine. And I can feel very connected to, my partner without the sex. As before, I felt like sex was the main way to connect. It was the number one connection for me. But now I'm realizing that having the intimacy actually creates a greater connection, which makes the sex better. Like I was kind of doing it backwards. I was like, oh, if we have great sex, then we can talk,
Mm,
But I now realize it's the other way. So
mhm.
now I really do enjoy being more intimate and being vulnerable and connecting and creating a space for my partner and myself to be fully expressed, authentic humans, to say whatever there is to say between us. And to me, that's the best connection you can get right there. When you can, go in and say, hey, I want to talk to you about how I really feel. And for that person to accept you, even with all that, like there's no judgment around it. And that's the intimacy that I've been experiencing now, that it's amazing, because the sex is way better once you've had those kind of conversations and you've opened up to each other. So now I'm living in that world some now, and I like it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds as though, sex played this really important piece in your life in terms of bringing you something that you were really seeking. Have you identified what that was? Like that sort of, that's why you felt so,
Yeah.
bound to it. What was it giving you when you were?
So here's how I now see it. That energy, that force that we call sex drive, I believe it's been misclassified. I believe a lot of things that we classify as sexuality are really spirituality, because if you think of the reason, like if you're a religious person, use this analogy, the number one reason why religions think or worship God is because God gave us life. They go, thank you for the life. Thank you, right? And the only way humans can create life is through sex. So the way that we can become God-like is through sex. So to me, that makes sex a spiritual act, right? But somehow we gave it another name and we call it sex. And then we put all the shame and guilt and all the other negative things that we have associated around sex. So that feeling when I look at a woman and I go, man, I want to, my mind was programmed to say, I want to have sex with you. But now what that feeling is saying, I want to create life with you. That's the manifestation of the life force, that life energy, that if you look around the world, all living organisms have that energy where they want to create more life. Life wants to create life. So it's not sexual energy per se. It's a spiritual, it's a life force. So that life force is very strong in me. The force is strong with this one, you know? And so now I see that that's what it was. But because I didn't know that, I just thought it was sex. So so I see it differently now. I think that's the drive that was in me. And now that I understand it, it doesn't, and I was fulfilling on the sex for other reasons too. Because in the environment that I grew up in, you know, the more girls you got, the more street credit, the more props you got, like, oh, you the man. So I felt like if I get more girls, get more sex, more people are gonna like me.
Mm.
So I kind of did it for those reasons too. But now I realize I don't have to prove anything to anybody. I don't have to have it. So I think what I was really seeking was connection, and just access to that spiritual energy, connecting to the infinite, like because I knew I could tap into it when I had sex, because that's when the woman was vulnerable and I was vulnerable, and I would always feel something in that moment. I'm like, man, this feels amazing. I
Mm.
want to. It wasn't the orgasm was just a part of that. There was this other connection that I felt, that connecting to another life force with the possibility of creating life. And I think there's something in us, and we all want to get to that, to experience. There's a pull, that there's a natural pull that we want to go there. So that's how I see it now.
So it sounds like you've been on a journey just of getting a little more freedom around that, so that you can still enjoy it and yet not be sort of the prisoner of it.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it, like, did you to in that sort of freeing up, um, was there other things that you started being, is it just a sort of certain peace with yourself? Like, I don't need to pressure to have this, or is it more like, oh, I found other places to get that feeling of life force? Have other
Um,
places started feeding you
so
that same
so two
feeling?
things.
Yeah.
So two things. One, what also shifted once I now saw what was underneath and what it really was, it no longer was something that I did to prove something. It changed that. It's like I don't have to do this. Plus, I just matured, and I'm growing. Like I don't have to prove anything, or my sexual prowess doesn't determine who I am. My manhood isn't based upon that anymore, or my self value, my self worth isn't based upon how many women I can get. Like I don't. And then also,
Just curious, like, would you have to then tell everyone, like, to get that approval, or just people knew?
A little bit of both. You know, you had your circle of guy friends that you might say, yeah, notch in my belt. And then sometimes, just people they just see how you live and they go,
And then they're like, "Hey, he's with this girl, this girl. Oh, he's got it happening."
which one is this? Is this that? Which one? Is it the same girl? So, but what shifted though was I now know that like that's not the best connection. Like I know that for a fact. Like the best connection now that I have with someone is to be me. Like it's a privilege that for you, Julie, I'm gonna say if you've never experienced this, to be with a man that you can 100% be your true express. I mean, you can say anything and that person doesn't judge you. And like, that's a privilege to be you and,
Mhm.
and to, and to have that comfort level to know I can be me with this person. Like,
Mm.
because for so long in so many of my relationships, I didn't feel like I could be 100% me.
What sounded like a negotiation, a lot of negotiation. Like, oh, she wants this agenda and I have my agenda. How can we make it work?
I don't even mean there. I mean in you meaning just having the space to even say how you really feel.
Yeah. No, I
Like
get that. Like
like
now that's what's really nourishing is to be in
oh
that situation. Yeah.
yes. Because now by me having developed that and being comfortable being that, I'm attracting women who are on that level. Water rises to its level. So now the intimacy that I'm experiencing is so much greater because I'm like, hey, I have the courage and the confidence to be me. I'm attracting women who are there. And so it's like a whole nother level of connection,
Mm.
because now we're saying the things that normally went unsaid. As in the relationship when I was in the 20s, there was a whole lot of unspoken things there.
Yeah.
And it just
Well, I just love how you brought in this whole aspect of like the life force and that sort of like that almost like that, that almost that religious, connection to something much greater, like this life force. And I'm just hearing in your connections that maybe the people you're attracting now, there's more and more of a potential to have almost a spiritual connection with your partner, which is a whole other connection, right?
well, so yes. And I'm just beginning on that journey,
Yeah.
meaning I'm
Yeah.
I'm, now that I'm aware of it and I'm aware of the connection. So now I'm just starting to consider some alternatives down that path, you know?
Mhm.
And so I'm looking at some stuff and I'm scared and I'm nervous because I was good at the other stuff.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so now, I have to learn a new way to be and express myself sexually in this new way. And it means I'm not going to be good at it in the beginning.
Mm.
So there's a little part of me that's nervous about letting go
Mm.
and to get over the, looking good, not looking bad thing, and trying
Yeah.
something new.
And having
So
hard conversations like, "Hey, Mike, I just don't know how to tell you this, but your emotional performance is really bad."
right. Like that conversation, you know. So yeah, so I'm ready. I'm ready for the second half of my life. I want to live to be 100, so I got another 50 years to go.
Yeah.
So I am going to be very intentional on the second half of my life, and now it's all about
Why why do you think it's worth it, to be intentional? Because you've been living, you said you were really happy for the longest time just having your as many partners as possible and kind of happy with that sexual physical experience. Like why is it worth it to go on this intentional path? Aren't
well,
you losing something?
ignorance is bliss. Because when you don't know no better, you're just happy because you don't know. But now that I've like, they say the mind's like a parachute. Once it's open, you can't put it back in. I
New
can't.
dimension that you kind of just
I can't.
experienced.
Yeah. So plus, you know what? Here's the biggest thing. Um, the old way of being was small and selfish,
Mm,
and it was all about me. And
mm,
it didn't make no difference for other people. It was about me. So now moving forward, I want to really be there for other people, because that's how you make the deeper connections. When you know, are willing to put other people's needs and wants before yours, that's that's the highest level of a relationship, you know, versus trading or I'm out to get mine. You know what I mean? And I spent most of my relationships trying to get mine, or hey, I'll trade you this for that.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm more like, you know what? I want to take care of you. How can I make how can I improve the quality of your life? What can I do to make you feel good? You know? And I actually enjoy that now.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where I'm at.
And what's the kind of response you're getting?
I mean, who wouldn't love that? You know, of course, women love that when I'm that, and it makes me
And the
feel good.
beautiful thing is you're not feel like at the past they wanted that romantic thing, but you felt like it was kind of their agenda. Now it feels as though you're coming from another place of like, wow, this is a way of honoring them almost. It seems like a different place it's coming from.
Yeah. So what I've also learned to address that, um, a lot of people believe that miracles take place over there or out there. Like the miracle is going to happen over there, and I'm going to witness it. But to have a miracle happen in you, all you have to do is shift your context of something. All you have to do is change how you view something, and then a miracle will show up, and people go, "Oh my God, how did you?" That's totally opposite, but it's a context shift. So now that I've had that miracle take place in me, I actually can receive pleasure out of giving pleasure
Mm.
way more than I ever did before. As
Hmm.
in before, I thought the highest form of pleasure was me getting the pleasure.
Mm.
But now I'm knowing it's way more when you give, because here's why. When you give, you have to generate it. You have to be the source. So for me to give love, I got to produce it in here. I have to produce it and then to give it to someone else. But if you're just looking to get, it's like you're just consuming, you're not creating. You know what I mean?
Hmm. That's such an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, I'm going from
That
consumer.
there's actually like a pleasure in being the creator of something.
Well, yeah. So think about this real quick about creators or producers versus consumers, right?
Mhm.
Think about any industry. Think about the life of someone that produces something versus the person that consumes it. So if you are a producer of love, you have so much. I can give you some, I can give her some, I can, but if I'm just, please give me, I need to consume, I need it.
That's
That's
very
a
true.
whole nother experience. So now
Mhm.
I'm a producer of love.
That
so,
is amazing.
so I have a lot to give.
Yeah. Now, just I know we're coming to the end of our interview, but I'd love you just to say, like, you had this big vision once that you shared with me about a community. And I would love you to just tell me where you're at with that vision because it has to do with love and relationships and um, people being, aligned with themselves and in their power. So go for it. Make
Yes.
it
So the community is called Metanoia that I mentioned to you. And after doing all this personal development work from different organization, companies, and coaches, I want to just basically create a community. I call it Metanoia TLC, stands for Metanoia Transformational Love Community. And so the basic three pillars of that is one part of the vision will be about transformation courses, classes, learning. The second part will be about healing through love, because I believe that's the way we all heal. And then the third part is about community events. And
like
so,
healing through love, like love, or like physical
yes,
love.
love, love is the most
Sex love?
transformational. No, not sex, just love. Love is the most transformational force on the planet. And through love, anything can be healed with love. As a matter of fact, I believe I stole this from Louise Hay, all problems can be sourced back to lack of love.
Mm.
Somewhere, somebody didn't get loved the way they need to be loved. And now they're having some issues with people. So I want to love people, love the wounds away, heal people in this community. And then once they're healed, then we can say, okay, now let's come over here and teach you and transform you. But we got to address the trauma first. And then I
Mm.
want to have all these community events. So that's called Metanoia. The website is metanoia.love. And it's still, to be honest, in its infancy. I'm putting it together. I have a board of people who I'm still putting together, and we're creating it and designing it. So I'm still looking for individuals who are interested and want to be a part of the creation of this.
Is it like online or in live person, like a real physical?
Well, created this during COVID. This just happens, some months ago. So as of right now, it's just something online. There's no physical brick or mortar yet,
Right,
but
right,
that's coming.
right. Okay. Well, Mike, it's just such a pleasure talking to you. It's so refreshing, and you're always so honest and so clear, so much discernment. So it's just really wonderful and just like also full of life. I feel you're full of lifeness.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So it's really great talking to you. And I'm sure all the people listening were having as much as fun as I was. So we'll have to talk again sometime.
Well, and I want to thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And it's always a pleasure to interact with you and do stuff with you. And I look forward to doing more stuff because I have something planned for you coming up. So we'll talk about that now in 2021. Yeah, so thank you. It was great for me. And you threw me with some of the questions, but I loved it because I wasn't prepared for
I
some
always
of
seem to find the little thing, right?
Yeah, I was like, whoa. So you had me thinking. So thank you for that. I discovered something in this conversation. So thank you.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm gonna say goodbye to our Facebook friends.